Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself. We are continuing met deel 2, part 2 of Asem deur Jan Vermeulen. The first part is available on YouTube as well, and you will know that there's a summary in a circular format done in order to explain kind of the theme of the breath, which means awesome in Afrikaans as well. On the current front page that you see also there on the screen, you should be able to identify important aspects of a voorblad. Die titel en die outeur se naam is ook daarop in hierdie weergawe. And also, what you note immediately is the coloring. Kleur speel 'n groot rol. We've learned in the past that color with Belade Verenkeling as well, the film, if you did the film study this year, how color plays a role with regards to telling a story. And in a book situation, a literature situation like a book, a novel, you have got the front cover to play with, and that's about it. The rest is based on your words and how you can form a picture with words. So we continue there and we look at the coloring, die kleure van die voorblad. Die voorblad wys 'n donker agtergrond, darkness. We'll get to that now as well in terms of what the meaning might be. It has got sunny colors, either in the late evening when the sun is setting or the early morning when the sun is rising, which again symbolizes the breath of how we do the circular motion of breath. You breathe in and the sun sets and you go sleep, so you breathe out. And as you breathe in again, the sun rises and a new day, a new dawn, a new start happens, which is very symbolic of the whole novel's storyline and happenings. We see the skyline at the bottom of Johannesburg, which is quite an important setting, the scene vibe. We want to look at our emotional and physical and time, space that we're working with in a literature work such as this. And then we also have the character portrayed, not necessarily Barry's, but a face that can be representative of the many different characters and character growths that we find in the novel. So in die roman, in die story, in die verhaal. So we've got the lines there as well that I quite find fascinating and a good choice of artist work because, or of portrayal, because it kind of gives that fast pace. But also, if you've watched the movie Interstellar, they portrayed the memory or the dreams or the dimensions in different layers. Think of it like that as well, where you have the lines of the in on the cover there, and the lines helping with memory segments that comes through that he remembers to help him through his journey. In the beginning, only bad memories, and at the end, the good memories that he formed on Seaplaas that is helping him to recover, to heal, to breathe again. And then furthermore, we've got the idea of black and white, and I put that in as a contrast, the light and the dark. Everyone's got light, everyone's got dark in themselves. We all have inner conflict. Two city buildings represent for me kind of the idea that there's a physical space that was dark for Barry's, a time that was dark, and then there was the light space, the farm that at first felt dark but then changed into light, and how he had to go back to the city, to the darkness, to go find his mother in the hospital to eventually find the light. And same with the quote there, 'n reis om vry te word en weer te leer asemhaal.' That's a very nice quote. It's a very nice theme. It comes from the back of the book, the omslag, and you kind of get the idea that this story is about a journey to healing and to learn to breathe again, which is exactly what happened with Barry's name. That is the whole crux of the book. I also put it in comparison with a man and a little boy. It's a little boy in him that he had to heal again. So, and as well with the sun and the moon contrast there, day, night, breathing in, breathing out, life, death, something in Barry's had to die. He had to say goodbye to a part of him in order to live a better life, which I think is quite important to look at. And then we get to the emosionele ruimte. Remember this phrase? Emotional space, emosionele ruimte. Dit is wat gebeur het in die verlede met 'n mens wat 'n invloed het ook op die hede en moontlik die toekoms. Dit is iets wat 'n invloed het op jou keuses wat jy maak, die besluite wat jy neem. Think of all those things in terms of emotional baggage almost. We start off with the fact that he had a family, and with a family, a mom and a dad, or in this situation, a mom and a dad. Unfortunately, we learned from his past that his dad became an alcohol abuser or an alcoholic, and that made it equal to the dad becoming Powell becoming quite an abusive parent, which then equals to bringing over that anger into a child. When you abuse a child, you actually transfer that into the child's living conditions and feelings and emotions. So this child now carries this burden, this cross, this uh, abuse with him or her for the rest of their life, until they kind of can process it and work through it. And that's why there's maybe psychologists in the world and therapists. But nonetheless, this is what happened in this emotional ruimte in the past, and how it had an influence. Obviously, it's much deeper than this. There's obviously previous generations that had an influence on Powell, how Powell grew up, and how his mother grew up, how Barry's mother grew up, and that also played a role, because every generation passes on something to the next generation. And if your generation is going to pass on anger and resentment and hate, then the next generation is going to find it difficult to start from that kind of beginning point, from a point of anger, hate, and despair, before they can kind of heal. So it's very important to understand that if you ever have children one day, to make sure you pass on something that can strengthen their genes for the future, not to demolish them. But that's a story for a different time. At this point in time, we're looking at the emosionele ruimte that Barnard has experienced, and the whole film has experienced throughout this journey. Now, if we look at the words there, that is what you can use these words to kind of guide you in an exam long question as well, whether it's a paragraph. You can even have use some of it as short answers as well. So we look at the beginning. Aanvanklik is a nice word to learn, and if you don't know what it means in English, go Google it. Aanvanklik het ons gedink dat Barry's se pa hom verbaal en fisies abuse het as gevolg van alkoholisme only. But no, it wasn't only from alcoholism. It's from baggage that he brought from his childhood. Die gevoel wat ons kry as the story unfolds, the gevoel wat ons kry is how Barry's was feeling abused when he was a child, and how he carries that feeling over. Gevoelens, feelings, deurmekaar. Barry's is deurmekaar. Throughout the storyline, we figure out that he's actually trying to fulfill something in him. He's confused, especially when he gets to see a place and nothing seems to be working out. It seems to be going worse, but he also doesn't want to kill his dad anymore. He's hesitant, things change, etc. Hy's deurmekaar. Hy voel afgesonder at one point in the journey. And this all represents what alcohol can do to a family. It can represent van past hurts that can hurt a family. But even Powell felt afgesonder that time when he found out that he was not Barry's real dad. So you can imagine this feeling of alone, or complete desolation, complete isolation rather, from the world, as Barry's also felt in Seeplaas when his friends stopped answering their calls. 'n gebroke gesin of 'n enkel ouer. Barry's was brought up by deur 'n enkel ouer. These are all example sentences you can use in your essays and in your answers to your questions. So make your own sentences from these words so that you can kind of start understanding how you can put something together for the exams. Barry's, even though he's a rebel, sorry, a rebel in Afrikaans, he also presteer. He does well at school. He's a sporty guy. Sportief is the word at the bottom there. Hy's akademies goed, and they live relatively well off. They're relatively fine in terms of living in kind of standards. He doesn't grow up in a very poor environment, nor does he grow up in an extremely rich environment, but it's all relative, obviously. And then all of this, the abuse and the alcohol and the confusion and the deurmekaarheid and the gevoelens and the chase to fulfill himself, you end up with leemte, emptiness, a gat, a hole. Forget, you forget. You want to forget about everything that hurts you. You forget how important parents are. You forget how important it is to forgive. You forget one of the other things in this film. Vergeet, jy vergeet. And you want to forget sometimes. You want to ontsnap. You want to escape. And that onverklaarbare woede is a very important phrase for me that I would suggest you kind of go and have a look at again. Onverklaarbare woede. Daai woede wat in jou nie verklaar kan word nie. Dit is asof jy weet nie hoekom jy kwaad is nie. There's an element of normality when you're a teenager in that, and then there's an element of abnormality if it goes overboard, for instance. So those are the words that I think you can go and look at, make sentences, Google them, learn them, understand them, and let's see what other ruimte we have next. When we look at physical ruimte, fisiese ruimte, the physical environment of Barry's, living in the city in a very quite lae woonstyl, having friends that are quite rich as well. The physical ruimte then it's moving there. So now it's his birthday. They climb into the car. They're going to party. Remember, he's got his own room in a flat in Joburg. In other words, many poor people do not have that. Many families have to share a room. So in his case, he's privileged in that way because he's got his own room. He's got his own privacy. His mom is not allowed in his room, probably. He's very strict, probably like that. He doesn't have respect for his mother. So the ruimte of that is very important to understand. He lived a very comfortable life. In spite of what happened, he couldn't get rid of that emotional ruimte, and now the fisiese ruimte is now building onto this emotional ruimte until it explodes. Nee. So he lives in his room in a lovely flat in Joburg with his mother. His girlfriend is allowed there. They busy kafoofeling there in the room, and the mom comes in or knocks or whatever, and they don't go, they don't continue, which means that he's obviously quite free. He gets quite away with quite a lot. They get into the friend Theo's cadet. They go to the club, but in the meantime, they're smoking joint, they're mixing it with ecstasy, and they're abusing drugs and alcohol at a young age and an illegal age anyway. So they're dancing at the club, they're picking up fights while they're taking drugs, and they were on their way home almost. Barry's convinces his friends to go past Butcher Shop, which is the drug dealer. That's another physical ruimte that comes back in the end of the story, at the end of the novel, where he revisits its Butcher Shop, and they have that gun kind of interaction situation where Butcher first has the gun at him, and then he's got a gun on Butcher, and where he had that realization. So the ruimte, the physical ruimte, is very important. Again, in your exam, if they ask, it discuss Barry's character growth by pointing out the physical ruimte, then you can point these things out. Nee. While they're doing drugs, they go fetch more drugs from Butcher. While they're doing drugs, in the car, Theo drives into a police officer. He crashes into a police officer. Barry's in the hospital. He goes to hospital. He wakes up, remembers the lights. He remembers being on the pavement there. He remembers the bloody front screen, windscreen. He remembers the physical spaces, okay, which contributes again to the storyline. He's in hospital. His mom is there. She's like, she doesn't know what to do anymore. The cops are there. They say to him, you're going to go to jail, boy, or you must go to your dad. And he's like, but my dad was the abuser. And we as a reader think, why would they want to send him back to his father if the father was the one who abused him? But the plot thickens. So he doesn't have a choice. His mom starts standing her ground. There's a little bit of character growth in the mother, from the mother's side, the character where she eventually keeps quiet and doesn't let him affect her. He has to get on a bus with Sergeant Schroeder, and they drive to Himansdorp, where he gets off, where Steph picks him up, a friend of his dad, in a beach buggy. Again, ruimte. You can see from city life now into more rural life, more primitive living, because his dad doesn't have even a toilet inside the house. The toilet is outside the house. Other things as well that's physically influencing his behavior, his mood, that's supporting this emotional conflict that he has in his head, the emotional ruimte that he's got. So he's now in Seeplaas. On the way there, he's in a beach buggy. The beach buggy breaks down. They have to carry their stuff further down. He leaves some stuff behind, which is eventually the connection between him and Philly, which becomes a very good, important friendship. So those are all symbolicness of physical ruimte that you can mention in your exam, and with these help of these words that you can see on the screen. So he goes to this, from this Lani life, doing whatever he wants to do, thinking he's all that and no one will tell him, and he's going to kill his dad because his dad was ugly to him, boo-hoo. Gets to this another environment, physical ruimte, physical environment, where primitive living, the dad is more or less still the same, except he doesn't abuse him. He's obviously, we as the reader meet the father Powell as more of a person who wants to make amends, who wants to try and fix this relationship between him and his son, because he's old enough to realize that the reason Barry's is acting out like that can be part of the reason, he's part of the reason, because he was abusing him when he was a child, but he's not abusing him anymore. So he wants to make amends. He wants to work with it, and that's when we realize that changing Barry's, or any addicts or any rebellious teenager that is busy ruining their lives to the point of going to die soon, if you take them out of their physical environment and you put them in a different physical environment, which that's where we see things like rehabs and halfway homes, etc., that takes place, then it's easier to heal what needs to heal in order to not fall back onto those addictive behavior. So he's in this physical environment, physische ruimte, with Powell and Steph, and all of these things like plays a role in his anger issues, in his dealing with all of the stuff, and it's actually doing good because there's no drugs now involved, so he's doing it sober. And he even meets a girl that wants to take him to the lighthouse, which is almost, it can be very symbolic either for him being a light at the end of the dark tunnel or a warning sign. So it depends how you look at it. If the fact that Olga wanted to take him there, I think it was more of a warning light. But Olga, being a very important character in his journey, teaches him also to grow up and to realize that she's bad news. Even though everyone warned him about her, he didn't want to listen. So the physische ruimte has to do with the fact that he was a lekker stadsjapie, a lekker city guy. He had his vryheid. He was rebellious because that's what you do when you're a teenager. He abused dwelmmisbruik. Hy is ongeskik. His character was quite rude for me in the beginning, and he was unhappy within himself. He was ongelukkig in any way the whole time. He was sexually active with his girlfriend. He was disrespectful, onrespectful teenoor ander mense, especially his mother. He had no respect for his mother, which in the end had a big consequence, because his mom, when she got stabbed, obviously, he realized that he's almost lost his mom as well. Okay. Ruimvlakte. So this was the city words that you can use, and how he felt, and how the physical ruimte represented his emotions, versus the physical ruimte of Seeplaas. It's ruim, it's very big, it's vast. He's got the see, which is water, which is healing, helend. There's a lot of metaphore here. Again, these words you can use in sentences in your exam. So go and study these words. Make sure you know what to write sentences down for yourself that you can use in your exam, in your long answer questions. Hy lewe 'n primitiewe lewe by becoming, living more primitive, with less to have on your plate, or what to do, or people to, there's no partying and abundance. the better you get to know yourself. The more primitive you live, the more chances of you finding yourself, the chance of you finding yourself is much higher. Remember, he went there to go and poison his dad with rottegif, and then he stumbled upon in the room, in his father's room, in Paul's room, he stumbles upon all the memories, the herinneringe, the teddy bear bunny that his father kept, all the cards that his father kept, etc. Which eventually comes out where Yuana brings the bunny to him, and he's like, where did you find this bunny? And Yuana takes him to the table. Yuana has been an amazing symbolic and support structure for Barry's throughout this journey. He meets new people in Seaplas, which is part of the physical ruimte for him, and he forms new relationships. Phyllis is a very good one. Eunice, who becomes his girlfriend at the end of the day, and her parents, and the fact that they're all eventually, the full circle finishes. He started off on Seaplas with the healing process, and then he had to go back to the city to go fetch his mother, to go deal with his past, because what he's done was horrible, and he had to forgive himself just to come back to Seaplas, but this time with his mother as well. And almost like his father and mother are maybe back together in a way as well, which is, they don't say it, but one can maybe assume that. Then we look at tydruimte, time, space. The space in terms of time. It starts, the story starts off with his birthday when he was turning 17 with his friends, and they were all going out to party. And here we know that the actions of that night het baie nagevolge, consequences. It comes maybe from eensaamheid. He feels lonely inside and he wants to fulfill this hole all the time. We know that he struggles with the idea of being in love versus lust. So love and lust, verliefdheid teenoor welis. He's working with an addiction. He's an addict at the moment because he uses and abuses drugs to hide away, to run away. The motorongeluk was the beginning of the end of his bad journey, of his bad life. Something needed to happen for him to make a change in his life, and there was a role model tekort in his life. That many times drug abuse is the opposite of addiction is connection. I heard that someone said that once when I visited a place called Hogsback, and this lady says that they're doing some rehab centers there also for people who are addicts and so on. And she says the opposite of addiction is connection. Die teenoorgestelde van verslawing is verbinding, connection, connectering. Om te voel dat jy behoort saam met iemand, jy kan met iemand connect, you can verbind met daai persoon, nee? Think about it. So use that in your essays as well. Use that in your long answer questions as well. In your dialogues where Barry has just been looking for connection. And we know now why. At the end of the story, we know why. His real father passed away, was killed by his stepfather, because his stepfather was very upset with what happened and how he was conceived and born. And his stepfather was also then obviously being sad and upset about the mom being raped, unfortunately. Then that triggered something in him, because remember, Powell also were brought up in a very abusive home. So any trigger is going to trigger Powell becoming an alcoholic or an addict as well. But who better to teach him the lessons now is a recovering alcoholic who has learned his lessons, who is trying to make amends with his family. That is in the now. That is where the story starts, the book starts, and that is the now. That is what's happening now as they take us through that. And this goes over into Christmas time and past Christmas time, obviously. So the time frame is Barry's birthday, past Christmas on the same year. If you think of how we get to know him is when he was a little boy. He was 5 years old, and so we find out not by flashbacks, but via dialogue and via the third person storyteller way of finding out what happened in the past. Tydsverloop is a nice word to learn. Time lapse. Gebeure, happenings. When he used to get punished. Pak sla is being corporal punished. He would get hidings, but to the worst degree. Dronk, sy pa was dronk, alcoholist. Seer, he's very sore, and he carries the soreness over to the present and then into the future as he heals it, and the soreness heals eventually. And then fisiese and verbale mishandeling comes to mind when he was that little boy. And all of that happenings, al daai gebeure played a role in the actions he took here. And then the journey starts from here into the future, where there's verandering in karakters. Daar's groei, there's growth, there's vreedsaamheid, there's the longing for peace, forgiveness, begrip, verstaan. For the first time at the end of the story, Barry realizes he was the reason, he's the cause, but now he needs to forgive himself. Choices, keuses, ware liefde, true love, not lust. And at the end, we see that all back as a family, a gesin together. Very important that. And then the last thing that, and that was by Christmas time and past Christmas time, obviously, when he went back to Joburg and then came back. So before we go on to the other one, part 3, I'll do that on a separate video. You can go and have a look at these words and go learn these words and make sentences in line with what the themes are, what the symbolisms are, what the character growths were. Make sure you understand the story and how it was puzzled together in terms of tydruimte, emosionele ruimte en fisiese ruimte.